You think you know the story of Johnny Appleseed, the gentle wanderer who crossed the wild frontier, scattering apple seeds and kindness wherever he roamed. Children picture him in a tin pot hat, barefoot and smiling beneath a wide blue sky, his sack of seeds slung over one shoulder. But what if I told you that behind this cheerful frontier tale something far older, darker, and more mysterious than any classroom legend, hidden beneath the surface of the American folktale in their myth that stretches back over 2,000 years, a myth of rebirth, sacred fruit, and the bridge between the living and the dead? Some historians believe Johnny Appleseed was not merely a pioneer or a preacher, but the American echo of an ancient archetype, the seed bearer, the orchard guardian, the wanderer who plants the memory of paradise itself. So let us journey into the soil of history, where truth and legend intertwine like roots in the dark. Once upon a time, in the closing years of the 18th century, there lived a man named John Chapman. He was born in Massachusetts in 1774, and as he grew, he became known far and wide as Johnny Appleseed. He was a strange and gentle figure, thin as a reed, sun-browned, often barefoot even in snow. He wore simple clothes, and people whispered that he carried his cooking pot on his head like a helmet. Wherever he went, he carried a leather bag filled with apple seeds gathered from cider presses. His mission, he said, was to plant orchards across the young American frontier. As the story goes, Johnny wandered through Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Indiana, spreading seeds in rich valleys and along riverbanks. He slept under the stars, shared food with settlers, preached kindness to animals, and spoke softly to children who followed him along dusty roads. To them, he was almost a saint, a holy gardener who never asked for money, who lived on what the earth provided. People say he was a man of deep faith, a follower of the mystic preacher Emanuel Swedenborg, who believed the physical world reflected the spiritual one. Johnny Appleseed, they said, lived by those visions. When he died in 1845, the settlers mourned him the hero of the frontier. Orchards blossomed where his feet had wandered, and his name became a song of simple goodness. That is the story everyone knows, the barefoot saint, the gentle sower of trees, who lived in harmony with man and nature, and in the end, they say, his orchards grew into symbols of abundance and the promise of the American land, a happy ending for a humble man. But history, like the soil, hides deeper roots. The tale of Johnny Appleseed was not always the wholesome parable we know today. Its earliest traces appear not in children's books, but in frontier journals and oral accounts passed from one settler cabin to another. In the early 19th century, newspaper clippings described him as a mystic, a hermit preacher, and even a prophet of the wilderness. Some settlers feared him. They claimed he spoke to spirits of the trees before planting, that he refused to cut living wood because each tree contained a soul. Others said he would arrive at night, whispering to the earth before scattering seeds in the moonlight. By the mid-1800s, as the United States began to industrialize, writers softened the story. They stripped away the superstition, reshaping Johnny into a symbol of pioneer virtue. His ragged clothes became quaint, his wanderings innocent. The eerie silence of his forest rituals vanished, replaced by moral lessons for children. In 1871, a short biography turned him into a Christian missionary of kindness. In 1933, Walt Disney adapted the legend into a cheerful frontier fable. By then, the wild prophet had been tamed into a cartoon. But beneath that varnish of patriotism and piety, older echoes remained. Scholars notice similarities between the legend of Johnny Appleseed and ancient European fertility cults. The man who sowed seeds across untamed lands resembled more than just a pioneer. He mirrored the ancient gods who wandered between life and death, planting the promise of resurrection. Across time, the story had shifted, from mystic to missionary, from sacred to simple, from myth to moral. Yet each version preserved one unchanging image: the man who walks alone, planting the seeds of eternity. On closer inspection, The legend of Johnny Appleseed bears uncanny resemblance to myths told long before America was born. In Norse mythology, the god Yggdrasil, the world tree, connects the realms of the living and the dead through its roots and branches. To the Celts, the apple was no ordinary fruit, it was the fruit of immortality. Grown in the mystical Isle of Avalon, to eat of it was to remember paradise, to cross the threshold of death and return renewed. In Slavic folklore, travelers spoke of a wandering gardener, a hooded spirit who planted trees over forgotten graves, so that the souls of the dead might find peace in their shade. In Greek myth, the hero Heracles sought the golden apples of the Hesperides, guarded by a dragon, symbols of divine knowledge and rebirth. Could it be that Johnny Appleseed was not merely John Chapman, the frontier preacher, but the living echo of this ancient figure, the bearer of seeds, the keeper of the orchard beyond death? His apple seeds were not random crops, they were tokens of life's renewal, of a wilderness once thought cursed. His barefoot wandering mirrored the pilgrimages of old, when shamans walked between villages as messengers of earth and sky. Even the apple itself carried ancient power. To early settlers, the apple was more than food. It was the drink of life when fermented into cider, the medicine of the sick, and the blessing of harvest. When Johnny planted apple seeds across the frontier, he was not simply cultivating trees. He was reenacting a forgotten rite, the seeding of civilization, the restoration of Eden in the New World. And yet, like all myths reborn, his story changed with time. The spiritual gardener became a national mascot, the orchard became commerce. The sacred act of planting became a patriotic emblem of American expansion. But if one looks closer, beneath the surface of every apple tree that still grows from his lineage, there lingers the echo of an older vow, a vow whispered to the soil under the pale light of the frontier moon. Johnny Appleseed may not have known it, but he carried within him the breath of countless ancient gardeners, men and gods alike, who believed that through the simple act of planting, one could touch the eternal. In 1912, long after Johnny Appleseed's death, an excavation near Marietta, Ohio unearthed a series of curious wooden artifacts buried beside what was once a frontier homestead. Among them lay fragments of applewood carved with spiraling motifs, circles within circles, resembling the ancient symbol of the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail. Nearby, archaeologists discovered a rusted tin pot, a handful of shriveled apple seeds, and a faded piece of parchment containing a verse written in archaic script: to sow in silence, to wake the sleeping earth, the seed shall know the path back to the first garden. Historians dismiss the find as a coincidence, perhaps a settler's relic, or a local imitation of Johnny's legend. Yet those who studied early colonial folklore bore something more profound. The inscription hinted at an older ritual, a prayer to the earth that echoed European pagan rites of fertility and resurrection. Further research revealed that stories of apple planters predated John Chapman by centuries. In the Black Forest of Germany, legends told of Der Apfelmann, the apple man, who brought both life and madness to villages, planting trees where blood had been spilled in war. In Celtic Brittany, travelers told of a pilgrim sower who planted enchanted fruit along ancient burial mounds so that spirits might rest. Even more striking were Native American parallels. Among the Lenape and Shawnee peoples of the Great Lakes region lands, Johnny Appleseed himself traversed oral traditions spoke of a man who walked ahead of storms, planting trees to appease the Sky Father who ruled the winds. These tales existed long before Chapman's birth. When researchers overlaid the migration routes of those myths upon Johnny's recorded travels, an uncanny alignment appeared. The man and the myth followed the same rivers, the same valleys, the same borderlands where civilization met wilderness. Some anthropologists now suggest that the story of Johnny Appleseed was not a creation of the American frontier, but the latest expression of a cross-cultural archetype, a memory that resurfaced wherever people faced the untamed world and sought to bring it under the spirit of growth and peace. In this light, Johnny's wandering becomes not random, but guided a continuation of a sacred pattern that stretches from the orchards of ancient Britain to the forests of the New World. His apple seeds were not just instruments of colonization, but symbols of a universal human faith, that to plant life in barren soil is to defy death itself. What seems like the simple act of planting apple trees carries layers of ancient symbolism. Each element of the Johnny Appleseed legend reflects an older spiritual language, one that speaks through metaphor other than word. The apple seed represents potential and immortality. Across mythologies, the seed is the vessel of the soul, small, humble, yet holding within it the pattern of eternity. In the Celtic silver branch legends, apples were gifts from the gods, tokens of the other world where time stands still. When Johnny cast his seeds into the ground, he was perhaps unknowingly performing a rite of remembrance, restoring fragments of Eden to the mortal world. The barefoot wanderer embodies humility and contact with the sacred earth. To walk barefoot was once a shamanic practice. It allowed communion with the living spirits beneath the soil. Native shamans, Norse seers, and Christian mystics alike practiced barefoot pilgrimages as acts of spiritual grounding. Johnny's lack of shoes was not a sign of poverty, but a symbol of his chosen connection to the earth's divine pulse. The tin pot hat, though humorous to modern ears, echoes the ancient vessel symbol, found in countless myths. The cauldron of rebirth in Celtic legend, the holy grail of Christian mysticism, and the alchemical crucible where transformation begins. Upon his head, the pot may have symbolized the containment of divine inspiration, the mind as vessel, the seed of thought germinating into spiritual fruit. The orchard itself is a potent emblem. From the Garden of Eden to the Isles of Avalon, from the Persian paradise gardens to Norsidun's golden apples, the orchard represents the boundary between worlds. It is both life and afterlife, memory and renewal. By planting orchards on the frontier, Johnny Appleseed was symbolically building bridges between civilization and wilderness, life and death, the known and the unknown. When settlers ate the first fruit of his trees, they participated without realizing it in a sacred cycle older than the land itself. Each apple was both food and sacrament, a communion with the mystery of creation. Thus, what seems a tale of charity and pioneer spirit transforms into something mystical. Johnny Appleseed's life can be read as a ritual enactment of rebirth and harmony between human and nature. He wandered not to tame the world, but to awaken it. His seeds carried not merely trees, but the remembrance of a sacred promise that life, no matter how harsh the frontier, always returns. And perhaps that is why his orchards grew even in barren ground, why his story endured through centuries of change. Something within his mission emanated with a truth buried deep in human memory, that by giving life to the soil, we keep the spirit of creation alive within ourselves. The story of Johnny Appleseed that you thought was a quaint children's tale of kindness and simplicity is, in truth, the convergence of folklore, spirituality, and ancient myth. Beneath his bare feet lay the same earth once walked by pagan sowers, druidic gardeners, and mystic prophets who believed that every seed held the memory of paradise. Johnny's journey across the frontier mirrors humanity's eternal pilgrimage, the quest to bring life where there is none, to heal what is broken, to plant hope in the shadow of death. The apple, that humble fruit of knowledge and temptation, becomes his offering to both God and man. Each seed he sowed was a silent prayer that the wilderness might one day bloom into something eternal. When the wind moves through old Midwestern orchards and the blossoms tremble in white clouds of spring, some say they can still feel his presence. The air carries a whisper, the language of roots and rivers, the voice of the eternal planter. In that whisper lies the truth. Johnny Appleseed was more than a man. He was the echo of a forgotten archetype, the guardian of the sacred orchard, the link between the ancient and the new. His legend is a reminder that even in the wildest frontiers of human history, the divine gardener walks beside us, scattering the seeds of eternity with gentle hands. And if that sends a quiet chill through your heart, remember this is only one of many legends that hide the oldest truths. Somewhere beyond the next hill, beneath the roots of another forgotten tree, waits the next story, ready to bloom.